Hi, I'm back. I think I'm just going to say that all the time. And then I should always say toodaloo when I finish. I don't always do that. Anyway, today I would like to tell you a story, and I'm going to call that The River. My father was very active in that he used to wrestle and he used to box, but his favorite was really swimming. And when he was young, he was on a competition swimming team, but they were grooming him to go to the Olympics. So there you go. One evening, he was out with some of his friends, and they said to him, well, we bet you wouldn't climb on the big arch on that river, on that big bridge that's over the river. Yeah, right. There, you don't say stuff like that to my father. And he said, what do you mean? Of course I would. I'll do it in a heartbeat. And they said, okay, well then let's do it right now. So that's what he did. He climbed on this huge arch. He got to the very top and he was all waving. By that time, a lot of people had stopped because they thought this was a guy trying to commit suicide. So somebody went to the police department. Remember, back then they did not have cell phones. And so there were quite a few people on the bridge and by where the Rathaus is to see what was going on. So he gets up there and he's all hamming it up. I can just see him and waving. And then he does this beautiful dive, comes down. Like he used to tell me, he said, yeah, I looked like a big bird or like an aeroplane. And there I went. Well, by the time he swam so he could get out, and there's a pretty good current in this river. It was several miles down the road. Well, guess what? When he got out, there was the police waiting for him, and they arrested him. And they put him in jail. And when the club found out what he did, they disqualified him, and they actually kicked him out. So here was this dream. So when I was very little, he taught me to swim in the river when I was about 5. So by the time I was 9, I belonged to a swimming club, and by 10, I was competing in all sorts of wonderful events all over Europe. Actually, that was really fun. But in the summertime, we had our clubhouse right next to the little ferry boat that we had to take to get from the main part of Bremen over to where we lived. And we lived, like, if you walk down to the left about 10 minutes, and just a couple of 100 feet to the right at the river was our swim club. So in the summertime, of course, I would go train, and then I would walk past the little ferry boat, and then that's where that beautiful little beach was, where I used to build my little sand castles. And there was also this little wooden house that belonged to the guys that would make sure that nobody would drown. So it was a lifeguard station. And one day when I walked by there, I heard this, hey, little girl. And I thought, little girl, who are they talking about? So I turned around, there was nobody anywhere near except these guys. And they said, yeah, hey, you, here, hey, come here. And I went, why? What do you mean, little girl? And they said, we want to know about you because we see you here 2-3 times a week, and you always have, your hair is still dripping. My hair was really long. It was below my waist. And my coach used to say all the time, Aranka, you're going to have to cut your hair sometime soon, because swimming in all these meets, you always have this wet hair, and then you just go home. We can't really do this. But anyway, so these guys said, come here, we want to know about you, because we always see you with this long wet hair. So we want to know, are you going to that club that's down there? And I said, well, which one? And they said, the one where the people sunbathe in the nude. And I said, well, no, of course not. And they said, well, why are you down there? I said, well, if you go a little bit further, the sunbathing club is on the left. My swim club is on the right. And they said, really? You're a good swimmer? I said, well, yeah, I'm a very good swimmer. And they said to me, really, you want to prove that to us? I said, well, why do I need to prove that to you? Well, because we don't have any girls that are lifeguards. And we think that you could be like our mascot because you're really cute and you've got this long hair, but we can't let you join if you're not a good swimmer. And I said, well, how about if I swim across the river to the other side? And they just started laughing. They said, you've got to be kidding. None of us will even do that. I said, well, why not? I've done it. And they said, yeah, come on. You have not done that. I said, yes, I have. I've done it with my papa. They were just shaking their heads and they said, well, we don't believe you. And I said, okay, fine. Then, you know, I don't have to go to work until later. So what do you mean work? I said, well, I work in a nursery. And they said, we're not sure that you're telling us the truth. I said, well, I can tell you where the nursery is. Could somebody shoot these little gnats, whatever they are? And they said, okay, well, no, yeah, so where you were going to go right in here. I said, well, no, of course not. And they looked at me and they said, why not? I said, there's a really strong current. If I get in the water here on the beach, by the time I can get out, it's going to literally make me end up several hundred feet away from where the ferry boat goes across. It's very difficult there to climb out. And I can't swim back against the current. So by the time I swim back, I'm going to be by the Weserbrücke. That's the bridge where my dad jumped off. And they said, wow, man, maybe you really are not lying. So what do you propose? I said, well, what we're going to do, if you want to come with me, we have to walk to the end of the beach and then go up the hill and walk down to almost where I live, which is Greteweg. And they said, well, where's that? I said, it's across from the stadium. If we get in there, by the time that we swim across, we'll be almost at the edge of the beach across from it. And then, if we're strong enough, we can make it and we can come out where the ferry boat lands, because that's fun, because it has like this piece, it looks like a little ladder that goes down into the water, but it moves, of course, with the water. And this guy said, wow, that's amazing. You really know this stuff, don't you? And I said, yeah, I've done this. And I said, you know what's really fun? And they said, oh, well, we're afraid to ask. I said, it's really fun when one of those barge boats comes and you time it just right when they are full of material. They are like curved like this. And if you can get to it right when you're sort of in the middle of that, you can climb out and you can be on the barge. And then the guys that are running it, they come out yelling at you and telling you that you can't do it. And they said, well, how do you know this? I said, because my papa and I did it. And then you have to be really careful when you jump off, because if you're too close to the boat, the propeller at the end will suck you right into the propeller. So when I actually did this with my father, my mother just about lost it. We came home and I said, Mama, you're not going to believe what we did. Papa and I went across the river. And she said, what do you mean? You didn't have any money. You couldn't have gone on the ferry boat. I said, no. We didn't take the ferry boat. We swam. And she was like, oh my God, I could tell. She looked like she was going to explode. And I said, oh, but it was even more fun when we swam back. Papa and I climbed on the boat. And she just said, what? I'm not sure I want to know this. What boat? I said, you know, those big barges. And then we got on the right and we walked all the way around the back to the left. On the left, we jumped back out. And that's when the man came that was driving the boat. And he was yelling and screaming. And she didn't know. She said, I don't know whether I should laugh, whether I should cry, or whether I should take your papa by the ears and lock him in the tool shed. She said, how could you do that? And my father said, well, I was there. I wouldn't let anything happen to my little girl. And my mother said, oh yeah, I really like that. It's your little girl? what happened to our little girl? Well, no, no. Our little girl wouldn't do stuff like that, but my little girl is like me. She does stuff like that. So my mother was, oh, she was furious. She just said, promise me you'll never do this again. And my dad grabbed my hand and he looked at me and he winked, which of course meant, just say yes to mama, but you know we're going to ignore it. We're going to do fun things together. Anyway, these lifeguards were just, they could not believe it. They just said, wow, that's really amazing. Okay, well, we don't want to find you dead in the North Sea, so we're going to go with you. And I said, okay, well, let's go then. So we walked up to where there was an embankment, and I said, you want me to show you a secret? And they said, oh, wow, we don't even know about you. Now what is it? And I said, well, guess what? My father knows that I go in the water here, but there are all these big rocks on the side of the river, and it's really hard to get down into the water. So here, let me show you what he did. I said, look, he moved some of the rocks so it's like a little staircase going into the water. And they said, wow, you really were telling the truth. So that's what we did. These two big guys, they were in their early 20s. We swam across the river, and then on that other side, I said, no, come a little bit further. No, we get out here. I said, no, wait. My papa moved some rocks here too. And they said, wow, that's pretty neat. So then we got out there and we went all the way up. There was a path, and then it went even higher where all these beautiful mansions were. And they said, okay, you ready to go back? I said, yeah. I said, look, if we go in here, I said, I bet we can come out right where the ferry boat goes. So we have to make sure, one, there's no ship coming, and two, we need to always see where the ferry boat is, because they can't move over. If we swim into the ferry boat, that's it. So we have to be really careful. And they just kept shaking their heads. One of them said, well, boy, I wish you were my little sister. This is really fun. I had no idea. I'm so glad we talked to you. So when we got back and we went up to this, this little house that they had there, they said, hey, you want to have some hot chocolate? Because we always have hot chocolate. And I said, oh yeah, that would be fun. And then they said, okay, now you are our honorary little person. And I said, what does that mean, honorary person? I'm not. And they said, well, officially girls cannot be lifeguards, and officially you'd have to be at least 15, but you're going to be a lifeguard. And they had this wonderful lookout that you had to climb up the ladder, and then there was this little chair up at the top, and they said, come on, let's go. So they made me hot chocolate, and then we all clambered up, and we were sitting up there, all three of us, and they said, wow, this is really fun. We have a mascot. You're our little mascot. So that's what I would do from then on. On Sundays, I was never working for Tante Clara, so every Sunday I would spend with those guys. And a couple of times when somebody looked like they were drowning, I mean, they would take me with them, and they'd say, come on, you help us. What would you do? And that was really, really fun. Anyway, all the time, I'm still going to my training, of course, and my father, oh, he was so proud. He would tell people, yeah, look at this, she won another one. I would do breaststroke or butterflies, usually just a single, but also I belonged to the relay, and then they always did me. Usually I would do a breaststroke in the relays. And yeah, so I had all sorts of little awards and stuff, and my father, oh my God, he was really proud. Then when I was almost 13, in the winter time, they'd always have a doctor come and give us a physical, because the training was tough. I mean, it was really heavy duty training, and they would give us a physical. So one day when he came, he said to me, I need to talk to your parents. They need to come. And I said, why? And he said, no, I need to tell them. Excuse me for a moment. What is that? My mouth's so dry I could spit cotton. Well, we got to fix that. Thank you. So my parents came, and that next Sunday actually, and the doctor told him that I could no longer be on the competition swimming team because I had a heart murmur. My father was absolutely crushed. It was so, I felt so bad for him. I mean, I thought it would be spectacular to do something like that, to represent a country, because I was such a good swimmer. But my heart wasn't that much into it. I was more interested in my fox, and I already had started drawing and painting and the gardens, all the flowers. But for my dad, it was really crushing, I think. But what's really sad about that is that after I left Germany and I had emigrated to the US, now think about this, I was 18. A few months after I emigrated, my father ran into one of his friends, and they went out to have a drink. And, well, of course, my father had stopped talking to me. Of course, he couldn't talk to me anywhere. I was in the US. But he did tell my mother about this conversation. This friend of his said, you know, I always thought it was so tragic that the coach of the swim club was friends with one of the girls that was also on the swim team, where he was friends with that family. And Aranka was a better swimmer than that girl. But that girl really couldn't excel, because whenever there was any important meet, it was always Aranka that went, and she won. So they convinced the doctor to lie and say that Aranka had a heart murmur, so she couldn't train anymore, because those guys were all buddies. And he said, I even think that they paid the doctor, because he said, remember, the father of that girl that was sort of, you know, in competition with Aranka was a very prominent doctor, and they had a lot of money, and they wanted to kick her out. And my father was just stunned. I mean, he said, that's just a rumor, isn't it? And this guy said, no, it isn't. I know it happened. And so, of course, my father told my mom. And then when I saw my mother again, she said, oh, it's really interesting. I wanted to tell you something. And I thought, wow, that's pretty crooked. But, you know, it wasn't meant to be. So, and I do know that my father was much more disappointed about it than I was. So anyway, he got disappointed about a lot of other things too, since I ran away when I was 15 and came here when I was 18. So, but anyway, that's how things go. I still love to swim though. It's one of my favorites. That is my story for today. And this time I'm going to say thank you and toodaloo.